The exchange. The river took her brother on a Sunday evening, the way rivers always take the ones you love, quietly, without warning, without asking permission. Dessie had been hanging laundry when she heard the silence. That was how she always described it afterward. Not a scream, not a splash, just a sudden hole in the sound of the world where her brother Eli used to be. One moment the air had been full of ordinary things, the snap of wet cotton, the drone of late summer insects, the distant murmur of the current running over the limestone shelf upstream. Then, those things were still there, all of them, but beneath them was an absence so total it felt almost physical, like a room with the floor pulled out. She dropped the sheet without thinking. It fell into the grass and lay there pale and crooked, and she ran, bare feet finding every stone and root in the bank path. And by the time she reached the water's edge, her lungs were burning, and the river had already gone glassy and still. He was gone, taken the way the river took everything it wanted, without ceremony, without leaving anything useful behind. They found his shoes on the muddy bank, laces still tied. That was all. The funeral was planned for next Saturday. Dessie did not attend. Instead, she stood in the root cellar beneath her grandmother's house at the stroke of midnight, a tin lantern, throwing orange coins of light against the packed earth walls. The air smelled of cold soil and old wood, and the dried herbs her grandmother had hung in bundles from the low beams. Lavender, yarrow, something bitter she had never learned the name of. In one hand, Dessie held the lantern. In the other, she held an old iron coin, worn so smooth it no longer showed whatever face it had once carried. Her grandmother had pressed it into her palm on the night of her own death, 7 years prior, closing Dessie's fingers around it with the particular firmness of someone completing a long-made arrangement. Along with the coin had come 3 words of instruction, delivered in a voice already growing thin and far away. Never spend this. Her grandmother had never said what it was for. But she had also never been a woman who wasted words, not one syllable in all the years Dessie had known her, which meant the instruction implied its opposite, that someday the spending would be necessary. Dessie pressed the coin flat against her sternum, over her heartbeat, and closed her eyes. She stepped forward. The cellar floor gave way like water. The underworld was not what the stories had promised. There were no rivers of fire heaving against their banks, no wailing multitudes packed into a gray plain as far as the eye could see, no skeleton armies rattling their way through eternal patrol. There was simply a long road the color of old ash, cutting straight and level through a landscape that had been emptied of everything it might once have held. No trees, no sky worth naming, no weather. Only a flat, colorless expanse on either side that suggested distance without providing it. The road did not curve. It did not rise or fall. It simply went. And at its end stood a building that was, in its way, the most unsettling thing she had yet encountered. It looked almost comically like a post office. A squat, practical structure of unremarkable brick, its windows pressing a soft amber light out into the dimness, like a general store left open past closing. A sign above the door read, in plain stamped letters, with no flourish whatsoever, "Claims." Inside, a man sat at a desk. He was neither old nor young, in any way she could pin down, as though age had been removed from him, the way color had been removed from the landscape outside. Not absent, exactly, but no longer relevant. He was neither warm nor cold. His gray suit had the pressed, permanent look of something that had never once been wrinkled. His face was the particular kind of forgettable that Dessie suspected was not accidental, the sort of face designed, consciously or otherwise, to let the business of the room take precedence over the person conducting it, a face that cleared itself from memory as fast as you looked at it. He looked up when she entered. His eyes were the color of filing cabinets. "You're early," he said. "My brother," Dessie said. She was still breathing hard from the run down the bank, or from something that felt like it. "Eli. He drowned this morning. I want him back." The man folded his hands on the desk with the patience of someone who had heard this sentence, or sentences very like it, more times than she could count. "They always want them back," he said. "Not unkind. Simply as a fact, the way you note the weather. I have a coin." She set the iron disc on the desk between them. It made a sound heavier than its size should have produced. Something shifted behind the man's eyes. A small, controlled alteration. A faint crack opening in the professional indifference, the way cold opens cracks in stone. He picked the coin up, turned it once, set it back down with a care that suggested he had handled exactly 2 of them in his long career and intended to account for this one properly. This buys a replacement, he said, not a reversal. The accounting must balance. I know. Dessie had not allowed herself to think about this part during the long walk down the gray road. She thought about it now. The way you think about something when you've decided clearly and fully, not circling but landing. The way you pull out a splinter all at once rather than flinching at it by degrees. I'll take his place. He goes back. I stay. The man steadied her across the desk. His expression did not change, but the room around them seemed to register the weight of what had been said. Somewhere beyond the walls, deep in the structure of the place, something sighed. Not human, not animal, but the sound of the building itself, or what the building stood for, drawing a slow breath. Very well, he said. He stamped a form she did not read. He handed her a receipt she did not keep. And somewhere, at a distance she felt rather than measured, upward, outward, through layers of cold, dark, and packed earth, and the membrane between what is and what isn't, Dessie felt the precise moment her brother opened his eyes on the muddy riverbed. She felt it the way you feel a knot release, the sudden loosening of something that had been pulled terribly tight. He was gasping, he was cold. He was alive and impossibly, inexplicably there. His fingers in the wet mud, the sky above him real and gray and full of ordinary light. She exhaled. Her breath didn't make a cloud, she noticed. Nothing here did. The amber light in the windows dimmed slightly, as though the place had blinked. You'll be assigned quarters, the man said, already turning back to his work, already rearranging papers that she doubted somehow had ever needed rearranging. Someone will come shortly to show you. Excuse me. Dessie turned. A woman stood in the doorway. Not a shade, not a suggestion, solid, present, real in the blunt and immediate way that almost nothing in this place was real, as though she were constructed of different material than the gray road and the colorless distance outside. She was perhaps 60. She had kind eyes and a serious mouth and the posture of someone who had spent a lifetime doing what needed to be done without making a fuss about it. Her coat was the deep brown of turned earth in late autumn. Her boots were muddy, genuinely, practically muddy, and they left clear prints on the gray floor with each step, as though the floor had been waiting for exactly this kind of mark. I'm here, the woman said, to take your place. Dessie's voice had left her. When it came back, it was smaller than she expected. You can't? My granddaughter made a voice ready. Oh, sop. The woman said with the measured patience of someone finishing a sentence they composed decades before the occasion arrived. She reached into her coat and set a second iron coin on the man's desk. It rang against the wood with a sound like a small, final bell. I told her she'd need it someday. I didn't say who for. The man at the desk looked between them, the young woman who had just offered everything, and the old one who had come to refuse that offer. For the first time, something crossed his forgettable face that was not procedure, not indifference, not the tired professionalism of endless accounting. It was something like amusement. It lasted only a moment. He picked up the second coin, held it beside the first, examined them both with the attention of a man who understood exactly what he was looking at, and nodded once, slowly, as though acknowledging a move he hadn't anticipated but recognized as sound. The accounting balances, he said. Dessie's grandmother crossed the room in 3 unhurried steps and cupped her granddaughter's face in 2 weathered hands, hands that still felt like hands, warm and dry and mapped with the specific geography of a life's worth of work. She held Dessie's face the way you hold something precious you are choosing to let go. Go home, she said. Her voice was the same. 7 years in the crossing of every threshold, and it was still the same voice, low and direct and without waste. The laundry still on the line. She slowly departed from the world. What had been of her grandmother she did not know. What would become of her she did not know. Dessie came back the way she'd gone, through the cellar floor, through the seam in the world, through a cold dark that pressed against her from all sides, and then released her, like a long breath let out. She stumbled into the root cellar with the lantern still burning in her hand. the flame unchanged, the herbs still hanging from the beams above her head. Everything exactly as she had left it, except that the night had advanced, and the darkness outside the small high cellar window had deepened toward morning. She sat down on the dirt floor and stayed there for a long time, her back against the shelves of preserved jars, listening to the silence of the house above her, her own breathing, the distant, indifferent voice of the river. Then she climbed the stairs. Outside, in the pale, dissolving dark before full dawn, Eli was sitting on the porch steps. Someone, a neighbor, a searcher, she would never find out who, had wrapped a wool blanket around his shoulders, and he sat inside it with the stunned, loose-limbed stillness of someone only recently returned to their own body. His wet hair was plastered flat to his forehead. His feet, bare as hers, were caked with river mud. He had the look of a person who has just realized they are somewhere they expected not to be, and is taking careful inventory of it. He looked up when the screen door opened, and the way he looked at her, the particular quality of it, focused and a little desperate, like a man grabbing for something he expected to fall through his hands, said everything about what those hours had cost him too. "I had the strangest dream," he said. "Me too," said Dessie. She sat down beside him on the step. Their shoulders touched. The laundry she had abandoned still swayed on the line across the yard, pale shapes moving against the dark tree line, patient as anything. The birds were beginning, cautiously, in the fields beyond. One note, then silence, then another. Neither of them spoke for a while, and that was fine. There are things that live below the reach of language, below the reach even of the silence that follows language, and what had happened in the night was one of them. Some debts are not discussed. Some payments are made in a currency that has no name, and leave no record except in the people who carry them. And some doors, once closed, stay that way, sealed not with lock or latch, but with the particular mercy of not being found again. Though every now and then, if the morning was still enough, and the fields were quiet and the river had gone to its lowest murmur, Dessie thought she could almost hear it, the sound of her grandmother's muddy boots on the gray road below, moving at the unhurried pace of a woman with nowhere she needed to be, and all the time in the world to get there. Walking steady, walking without regret, the way she had always walked. Dessie never went back to look. But she kept the lantern by the cellar door, just in case. Trimmed the wick every week. Made sure it always had oil. You never knew. The end.